Hello, we're here today with Régine and Christophe, experts from 11 Ways, an agency specialized in accessibility. Together, they have nearly 50 years of combined experience in accessibility. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, to get started, Christophe, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got started in digital accessibility?
Well, like many people in this area, my background has nothing to do with accessibility because I originally studied languages and literature, then a bit later followed by a one-year curriculum in IT. And then when I wanted to apply for a job, I just happened to find something that, a position at university where they needed someone, well, not for accessibility, but then through some shifting of roles within project, I ended up in an accessibility-related research project, and that's how I got started. And at the time when I was studying, there was no way to study accessibility anywhere in Belgium, as far as I know.
Yeah. Wow. Régine, so what is your background exactly, and how did you get into accessibility?
Well, I have the kind of same answer. So I also studied language and literature. I also started accessibility by case. At that time, my job was to check the conformance of a website, well, many European websites, against their style guide. And one section of the style guide was about accessibility already at that time. This was in the early 2000s. So there was no training for accessibility at university. And so I went to Paris, follow a training there, 1 week training by Brinet.
So can one of you explain what 11 Ways exactly does? I think, Régine, that you maybe could answer that beautifully.
Yeah, I hope beautifully. We do a wonderful job. We check the accessibility of websites and apps and documents and videos, all what must be accessible according to the legislation. So that's for the audits, and we also coach clients and help them raising their maturity. And we give trainings, we organize user tests, so inclusive user tests with people in the disability situation. And I think I covered everything, yeah. Audit, training, coaching, user tests.
Yeah, okay. And what exactly is your role specifically at 11 Ways?
Well, the same as Christophe, so expert in accessibility, and I do all what I mentioned before. And the part that I do more with my seniority is helping the client growing its maturity. So it's working at the process level, design systems level, so not at one single product, but a broader approach for corporate clients.
Yeah. Okay, and Christophe, you do something similar, but not exactly, right? What is it you do?
Formally, my role is described as Principal Digital Accessibility Specialist. So that means that every internal question where people have doubts about how to interpret a certain guideline or whatever, then basically the last resource inside the company, but any doubts in that area. But otherwise, I work for clients almost the entire time. So one of them is the European Commission. The other one is the Flemish Employment Agency, VDAB.
So then my next question is, what is like a typical workday working for 11 Ways or for the European Commission or other jobs that you guys work on? What does it exactly look like? Like, what do you do day to day?
Well, I can start.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, looking at all your inboxes, Slack messages, and Outlook, etc., to look at potential urgencies, and then following up all previous audits. So it's called regression auditing and iteration. So often we create tickets based on issues on products, and then we exchange with the developers, the designers, the editorial team, whether they have questions or they think it has been solved, and then we double check if it has been properly solved. We answer comments, add resources, etc. Then check articles. We read a lot about accessibility newsletters and new articles, and we share between us at 11 Ways. We always have, I found that, have you noticed this new pattern in a design system or whatever? We check. So we have a lot of exchanges, and yeah, that's what we do. Christophe, I don't know if
Yeah,
you think
Christophe,
about
what does
something
your day
else.
look like?
This is to a large extent similar. Except for VDAB, we start with a so-called stand-up in the design team. And so where we tell people what we're going to work up on in the rest of the day. Usually both for the Commission and VDAB, there are JIRA tickets that are waiting for my attention. Sometimes there are a bit of larger sets of components or websites that I need to check. But for the most part, it's similar to what Régine does.
Yeah. Lots of emails, I hear. Okay, so Régine, your background is more in user experience research. And Christophe, you come from like a more technical background. And you've contributed to the web content accessibility guidelines, the WCAG. How do you guys think your background influences your point of view and like your approach on accessibility?
That's maybe what differentiates us more, because you have to say that we also have only 2 days in between. we were born the same month. So the difference between us is really that background. So for me, it's more oriented on users, the needs, the assistive tools, the support issues that we have in assistive tools. Also, sometimes you do something perfectly according to the standards, but that's not the way screen readers interpret that standard. So it doesn't really work for the blind users. So I'm more targeting that part, so really testing the experience for users using assistive technologies, not only based on standards. So Christophe knows standards much more than I do. So we are really complementary, and sometimes I really ask him, what do you think? It's not exactly what the standard says, but the experience is actually better. How can we find a compromise?
Yeah, do you think there could sometimes be disagreements between both of you? Because Christophe is more focused on the guidelines and you are more focused on the users?
Yeah, on disagreement, misalignment, let's say, and then we have to, we find a compromise also depending on the impact, the effort, the cost for the clients, how flexible the code is. Sometimes it's just not feasible, or it would cost too much to improve the experience beyond the standards. But I really appreciate these discussions with Christophe, because it's really the two ways of thinking.
And with regard to the technical stuff, so I also do a bit more things that can be automated to some extent. For example, for a client, I recently wrote a script that finds all accessibility statements on a bunch of websites for the client, which is a rather specific task that is not every accessibility specialist does, I guess.
Okay, so next, this is what I'm really curious about. What are your guys' personal biggest frustrations when it comes to digital accessibility? What really annoys you?
Repeating again and again the same thing. And maybe, the keyboard test. So we are often asked to check components after they have been developed, maybe even some days before it's published. And then we just do the keyboard test, which is a very easy test, and it's wrong. So the development has to restart all over again. So it's also frustrating for us to see that we will ask the developers to restart their whole code while it could have been tested before. So that last minute test that could have been done before, this is really a pity.
Yeah.
Yeah, to generalize that a bit, I could say that one of my frustrations is that organizations don't have a real process where we are involved from, as early as we should be involved. And then somebody says, okay, we should have that kind of component. And then at the later stage where you get involved, I will say, okay, there's this issue with the component. And the people who designed it should have done this differently. If I had been involved early at the design stage or even the analysis stage, we could have prevented the issue, but we're involved too late usually. That's a big issue.
Yeah, so people think about accessibility too late, really, when they should be thinking about it from the very start, the beginning of a project. Okay,
Exactly. The earlier you start, the less cost you have.
Okay, and then, so people think about accessibility too late usually. But a lot of people still need to be convinced of the importance of accessibility. How do you guys approach sharing like the importance of thinking about accessibility?
Well, there are so many good reasons to think about accessibility. As I said in my training, it is not a good thing to do, is the good thing to do. It has many benefits. Not only because you will have a broader audience, that's logical, but also because it will improve the experience for much more people than only the disabled community. Because you have to think about people that could be in a disability situation temporarily. Yeah, I have many other arguments. It makes the websites more mobile friendly, because having it accessible means also having it flexible for Zoom and kind of high level Zoom. So this generally means that the website has to be mobile friendly, also responsive. So it will be touch friendly, it will be voice interaction friendly. So all new and future interaction methods will already be supported by the website.
So imagine a manager comes to you and is like, oh, accessibility, why is this necessary? This is expensive. How would you convince that kind of person?
Well, there are several types of arguments you can use. One of them is simply the legal one, which is, of course, also the least attractive argument. So the legal one is basically, if you're working for a public authority in the European Union, it's a legal requirement. But even outside that, there's also the more general anti-discrimination legislation. So when you don't take accessibility into account, you exclude certain people. How many people do you want to exclude, really? So basically more ethical arguments, you could say. Then another argument you could use is that if you implement accessibility in a way that where you also involve people with disabilities, you create a better user experience for everybody, basically. So these are the main arguments, three main arguments I would come up with.
I can also add about machine-to-machine friendliness. So if the code is really semantic and makes an accessible website, any other machine that has to communicate with the code will better communicate. It can be Internet of Things, it can be Google or search engines, and that may be also essential for voice interaction with voice assistants. So,
yep. Christophe, I know you've been interested in AI for some time now. How do you think AI will affect the future of accessibility, and do you think it can replace it?
That's a very big question.
I know.
Well, one thing is current AI is mainly based on machine learning from data and generates models rather than rules or anything. So everything that comes out of it has a certain probability level to it, or sometimes a confidence level. So it's never 100%. It always requires human checking. And one of the issues that I see is that, especially certain so-called overlay tools that rely on the AI, they give the impression that the reliability is 100%, which is never the case. And that can lead potential clients, in the wrong direction. That's a danger I see.
Okay, so what I took away from this is that AI could help, but definitely not replace. Yeah, okay.
Well, that's an unanswerable question at the moment, because I mean, who knows what AI will be able to do in 50 years from now?
True.
That's especially when improvements get to accelerate at a certain point. I have no idea what the limit is.
So let's move on to the next part, a bit more technical. A website can be accessible, compliant, and conformant. These three things all mean something different. So let's start. What makes a website accessible? And is it the same as being compliant?
So yeah, these are three different things. So conformance means conforms to a standard, such as WCAG or EN 31549. That's basically a baseline for accessibility usually. But standards in themselves are voluntary. Nobody's required to implement a standard unless there's a law that says, okay, you need to follow this or that standard. That's the case in European Union. The Web Accessibility Directive requires compliance with EN 31549. So basically, when you conform to the standard, you comply with the law. So compliance is with the law, and conformance is to a standard. That's the difference. Don't know if that everybody makes the same distinction, but that's usually at least how I make it. Now, accessibility on the other hand, that is something in the user experience, and since no standards can fully describe an accessible experience, there is always a gap between compliance and or conformance and real accessibility.
Yep.
Another thing to bear in mind is that accessibility is basically full accessibility would imply that every user can access a website, if you're talking about accessibility, in all sorts of contexts. Whereas in reality, there will always be certain users who can't use a website either, regardless of context or in specific context. So it's basically an almost unachievable goal if you take it in the absolute sense. That's why we need standards to set at least a baseline. It is really difficult because I've never audited a website that was 100% conformant.
But it has to be.
Yeah, it's true. So that's why we also hear that it's progress over perfection. Let's start earlier and let's start with the priorities, and then it's a feasible path. If you only look at, wow, I have to have 100% on my exam, that maybe, it's long-term targets. But at least let's start and split the task in smaller efforts.
Yeah. So if my website is accessible, then will it be easy to use for any users with disability?
There will always be people in disability situation that will never open a computer. So actually not, at least the disabled community. For people that may be in a temporary disability situation, well, it will depend. There are also cases where your disability, even temporary, won't impact. So anyway, it's the same for you. So yeah, even being 100% conform with all the success criteria required by the legislation, it doesn't give the access to.
Yeah, so since the question asked whether an accessible website would be easy to use, I think it's also worth pointing out there's a difference between effectiveness and efficiency. So the website that is conformant should be, users with disability should be able to work with it as effectively as someone without a disability, but they won't necessarily be able to use it as efficiently. That's an important distinction that's also made in the definition of usability, actually.
Okay. So what I was going to ask, if you accommodate people with a certain type of disability, can that affect the experience of people with another type of disability? Could they overlap in some way?
It often overlaps, actually, because people with different kind of disabilities may even use the same assistive tool, but with another goal.
Yeah.
So blind user will use a screen reader because that's the only way for them to reach to hear the information. But we know that autistic people may also use the assistive tool to combine the visual input with the oral input, because it helps them concentrating.
Do you think they could get in the way of each other, that one person would need something and the other person would need the opposite? Is there any case that could happen?
Yes.
It's
One
really,
example
really
is
rare.
Some people need high contrast, but some people need low contrast, or at least a less glaring screen. So you need to have a web page that basically can adapt to both if the people are using assistive technologies that adapt contrast. But without the assistive technology that adapts contrast, I think the contrast will be too high for some or too light, too bright for others. That's one issue. Another one that I recently came across is when you have decorative images, you will mark them in a way that they are ignored by screen readers for blind users. But a partially sighted user may still be curious what's in the image, even if it's decorative. But if there's no description, because it might, well, we don't give a description to the decorative images normally, then basically they're a bit left in the cold wondering what's in the image. So that's a potential conflict also.
But it's rare cases. Anyway.
Yeah, Régine, I know you know a lot about decorative images, and do you think decorative images should be explained more? Because sometimes an image might communicate something to the user, and if it's not explained, then it might be missing some kind of message. Do you think that is the case sometimes?
Yeah, I know that blind users themselves sometimes say that they want the emotion to be conveyed if that's the goal of the image. But it's also true that there are a lot of information that they hear more than what is only written, but they will hear that is a button, that is a link, that is an image, that is a table. So they will also hear a lot of things, and they take more time to discover the content of a page, even more if it's not well structured with titles. So if we also start describing all the decorative images, actually it will be too much. So yeah, on one side they say that they also want to know what is decorative, but on the other side,
yeah. So how do you decide what is important and what is not?
If the image is really there for emotion, if it really conveys. I remember an image on a bank website, and they say that they were ready to help you. So there was an image supposed to convey that idea. So there was a tagline, but also the image supported that idea that the bank is there for you. And it was a banner image on the homepage. So, okay, that one, why not? But every single image that is there on use cards, for instance, you have that on the template. There is a space for an image, and then you have to fill it with any image that could match the title of the news. But actually, it's just there because it was in the template. But it conveys really no meaning, no emotion. It's just there to fill a blank space. So that definitely shouldn't be described.
Okay, so that is really where you experts come in and decide what is more filler and what is more important to convey to the audience. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Next, let's continue to European Commission. So first of all, could one of you explain in a nutshell what the European Commission's accessibility policy looks like today and what exactly it is?
Well, I can say something about the action plan. So you know that there is this directive that applies to public websites, but it didn't apply to the public websites of the European institutions themselves. It applied to the public websites of member states. So now they just publish an action plan where they also ask EU institution websites to become accessible and complying with the same standard. So they commit to do the same effort as member states.
Okay, Régine kind of answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So the European Commission publishes directives obligating member states like Belgium to make their public websites accessible. But the European Commission and other European institutions have their own websites that are also aimed at the European citizens. So my question is, do the EU institutions practice what they preach? Do they follow their own rules?
They practice what you preach aspect is, of course, very relevant. For example, a long time ago, the European Commission declared the year 2003 as European Year of People with Disabilities. And now we're 21 years later. And when you look at the European Commission website, there is still work to be done 21 years later. It's impossible to ignore.
And even for the websites of the member states, actually, the compliance is really, really low, less than 10% in the member states.
Something they need to work towards then.
Yes, a lot of work for the future.
As you guys said before, it's a progress.
Very slow progress, unfortunately.
Okay, so it's a progress. So accessibility is sometimes about the small wins. Can one of you give an example of a small change that you implemented that had a big impact?
Well, for me, the changes that I do at the design system level are essential. So that design system is used by many websites in the institution world. So yeah, I know that when I ask, for instance, there are tags, and for each tag there was what is called an area label, so kind of description of the tag. But because of that area label, all the tags were the same. So it had the same pronunciation by screen readers because it has been coded in a wrong way, so that it always pronounces. I think it was tag, the term that was pronounced tag, instead of saying what the tag was about, because it was overwriting the visible label with a kind of hidden label for screen readers. But it wasn't supposed to say always tag. So we remediated that so that now all the tags will be pronounced correctly in all websites that use that design system. Without that, well, the information was lost for blind users. It's not a big component that is used a lot, but I know that acting at the design system level, it will be applied to many websites.
Yeah. So you could say that's something you're proud of that you made happen.
Yeah. When we see such a blocking issue where information is really lost or a button is not clickable at all, and we know it will be solved in many websites because we solved it in one instance, centralized instance of the design system, yes, we are really happy. We know that we will have impact on the experience.
Yeah. Okay. Christophe, is there something that you are proud of doing?
Well, at the Commission, there's more than one library of components. So one is called the Europa Component Library, another one is called the Web Tools. And for example, Web Tools, you also have maps, and some of those maps you can navigate with the keyboard. But originally, it could be difficult to see where the keyboard focus was inside the map. And the trouble is, some of those maps have a bit of a lighter background, some have a bit darker background. For example, some country can have different countries on the European map can have different colors. So you need a focus indicator that contrasts with both. So how do you do that? And I suggested something very simple. Use a keyboard indicator with a double border, a white one and a black one around it. So whatever color you land on, either the white or the black border is going to have sufficient contrast. So very simple thing, but because these web tools are used across the Commission websites, that is something that can have a big impact.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that does sound like a smart solution to something that could be a big problem. Okay. Thank you. Of course, we want these little changes and the industry to change and strive and keep progressing. How would you guys encourage young people to pursue a career in this industry?
It's very large. So it's not only about websites, but also about apps and documents and videos and games and virtual reality. It's a never-ending story. So yeah, I'm really curious, and I know that Christophe is also. So we will always have something new to learn.
Another thing is that the current generation of young people is I think much more sensitive to diversity and inclusion than when I was young. So it's good to point out that, well, accessibility for people with disabilities is part of that diversity that I hope they care about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, something else that is interesting is that it's not only technical. Part of the job is really relying on code and technical competencies. But as we said, we don't have that background. So it's open even to people that studied language and literature.
Yeah.
And it also concerns design and writing, management. So it's really broad, and you have the opportunity to work with designers, collaborate with them, and participate in wireframing meetings, because there are also things that you can solve directly, but avoid making wireframes that wouldn't be accessible. So it's really large, and you are not alone. You will work with a lot of different profiles.
So then really my last question of this interview, do you guys have a general takeaway or a really good tip that comes from your collectively 50 years of experience. You must have learned a lot. Is there a certain tip, a best tip that you would like to give?
I would maybe say doubt. You find a lot of articles or even code or patterns that claim to be accessible. Doubt, test. Because it's not a mastered competence, so there are a lot of libraries that pretend to be accessible but are not. So you have to have doubts to material that you find online, articles, but also doubt on assistive technology support. So it's a lot of testing and checking. Don't take something as accessible because they say it is. So doubt and test.
Okay, Christophe, do you have a tip for the people?
Yeah, if you look at the standards for accessibility, it can look intimidating as a subject because it takes quite a while to become familiar with all the applicable requirements. So I would say, well, start with something simple. If you have a website, check whether you can navigate it using just a keyboard. Just you start by using the tab key and go through everything. And can you read everything? And can you see where you are with the keyboard focus? And start working from there, and then look at the more complex requirements. It's still going to be a long climb, but at least you have a starting point.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, if I can give
sure,
tips. So I say doubt and test, and in the test, I would say involve people with disabilities, because even with more than 20 years experience, I still learn every time I do a user test. So you have to see how a blind user uses a screen reader. You have to know that you will never be able to test a website like they can. They have they have more knowledge of their own tool. You cannot step in the shoes of a person with concentration issues. It needs to be tested with real users and users with a disability. So it's essential.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like, who better to test than the people who are going to use it? Of course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like user test, usual user test, not inclusive one. In user experience, we say it's not only theory. You have to perform user test, but it's the same for accessibility.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much, both of you, for your time and sharing your knowledge. I do think that listeners have learned a lot about accessibility and the importance of it. Are there any additional insights or thoughts that one of you would like to share?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I share and I follow a lot the accessibility there. So if I find an interesting article, I'll promote it there every time. Yeah, go beyond theory and try to have contact with people with a disability to really understand their experience and their challenges.
Okay, Christophe, anything to add?
I can't add much to that.
Okay.
I can only say the best moment to start with accessibility is now.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure learning from your expertise today. And thank you for the meaningful conversation.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.